Hi guys, my name is Alicia Beatty, and today I'm going to be doing a speech about the death penalty and why I think it should no longer be existent. According to an article posted by the American Civil Liberties Union, it is known that the death penalty is a largely dependent factor on how much money the victims have, the skill of their attorneys, race of the victims, and where the crime took place. People of color are more likely to be executed rather than white people. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, it states that over 150 people were wrongfully convicted. Meanwhile, 5 of those people were executed on capital punishment. Throughout my research, I have found that there are numerous people facing an unfair trial or disadvantage when receiving the death penalty. I feel like looking back at all the research, there are so many trials that received wrongful convictions. Since the year 1970, within America alone, there have been 1,571 people executed, and as October 1st, 2022, there are 2,363 people currently waiting on death row for their execution, and within these numbers, 191 people have been wrongfully convicted. Taking away the death penalty for good could help the wrongfully convicted and stop letting the real assailants take the easy way out. Even though I have previously talked about the death penalty and the country as a whole, I would now like to talk about the death penalty within our state. Texas holds one of the highest execution rates within our country since the 1980s. Texas has had over 500 people executed since the 1980s. Meanwhile, Virginia falls second with having 113 people executed. Texas typically executes 12 inmates annually. This makes Texas lead the nation by 4 times the amount of every other state. Within our state alone, the past 5 years, nearly 70% of criminals convicted of capital punishment have been imposed as people of color. One reason this might be included because how Texas prosecutors choose to infer the death penalty are strongly more to infer it on people of color, meanwhile also underrepresenting them within the jury. Within Texas alone, there are multiple cases that the victims have been innocent, that have been executed or exonerated, that are on death row. Carlos D. Luna and Todd Willingham were both victims of mistrials within Texas. Both Carlos and Todd died due to capital punishment and pleaded innocent the whole time they were on trial. Meanwhile, were still found guilty. Once dead, more investigators looked more into the trials, and they soon found out they were both innocent. Both trials, the leading verdicts were due to misinformation and lack of information. Within Carlos de Luna's case, he was found guilty solely from an eyewitness, even though there was no physical evidence that connected him to the scene. Todd Willingham was convicted to police officers ruling it out as arson, but there were never any signs of arson once a real scientist looked into it after he was executed. There was also a jailhouse informant that was paid off to lie to him to get to a conviction from the judge himself. Now that we have gone over capital punishment within our state, let's talk about capital punishment within our country as a whole. Our country alone has one of the highest rates of capital punishment within the world. Within our country, the death penalty is mostly imposed on poor people who don't have enough money to hire a good lawyer. Whether the defendant gets convicted of the death penalty typically relies on the quality of his counsel. After the first trial, there is no right to the counsel, which leaves the people sentenced to death way harder to find somebody who will help them. I understand that most of these convictions of capital punishment people did in fact commit horrible crimes, but they also deserve to receive the right to a fair trial and still access to a reasonable lawyer. The Sixth Amendment alone states right to a fair trial, right to a lawyer, and right to an impartial jury. Even though the Sixth Amendment states this, these people still being convicted typically don't receive that kind of treatment. Although capital punishment is very brutal, it is also very expensive. California currently has 670 inmates being held under capital punishment. The annual cost that taxpayers pay a year to support this is $63.3 million a year. Meanwhile, within Maryland, one execution a year costs taxpayers around $37 million for each execution being processed. I get people on death row are usually guilty and need to be punished, but why should taxpayers get punished by paying the ones of their crimes? If the government allows capital punishment to resume within the states, The government should be the one paying for the capital punishment and being found liable of paying their fees, not taxpayers paying their fees. Informing the general public about how harsh and cruel capital punishment is nearly how costly it is. It should hopefully be alarming to the public, which is why we need to find a solution to help fix it. I insist on a solution that can help innocent people living on death row currently, which would simply be life without parole. Taking away capital punishment and instead sentencing people to life without parole could help the innocent people living on death row have a chance of finally getting a rightful conviction. In a 2015 research study, out of the 8,466 people sentenced to death, 3,194 people had their sentence convictions overturned, whether it was to lower punishment or there was proof to show that they were innocent. If our country initiated a life without parole conviction rather than the death penalty, it could save us so much time and money. Every state that has a death penalty also has the life without parole option. The only differences between these two convictions is that we are willingly killing somebody. People can spend between 5 to 50 years on death row waiting for the day that they get executed. Meanwhile, they could be living out their whole life within jail, having the guilt on them from the crimes that they have committed. We should not let taxpayers pay for the crimes that they did not commit. Taxpayers should not be paying millions of dollars a year for a crime that they did not commit or even know about. A solution to this problem would be having the government pay for these crimes and not throw the problems onto every federal taxpayer in America. Within New Jersey, for the past 40 years altogether, they have paid around $253 million towards capital punishment, which is roughly around $6.3 million a year. Within North Carolina alone, they could have saved over $22 million within 2005 and 2006 for taking away the death penalty, and imagine what it could do for this country as a whole. Throughout this entire speech, I have gone over so many different facts and statements about the death penalty and capital punishment alone. The death penalty is causing more and more problems than solving problems, including the unfair trials, the unlawful convictions, and the amount of money that is spent every year, and the innocent lives that are being taken. Bringing awareness to this topic hopefully can help someone solve one of our problems. All I ask for everybody listening to this speech is to really understand capital punishment and how it truly works and think if it's really helping our country or hurting it. Thank you.